if
No,
possible,
I'm
to start.
here.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, good
Hi.
morning. Okay, I was trying to share my screen. Give me one. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for welcoming me, and thanks to the TGS Baltics and the Lithuanian Association of Data Protection Officers for inviting me here today. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, I want to start by saying that this is an undeniable that the pandemic has changed our world in ways we couldn't have previously imagined, pushing lives and business online in record time. But the economic impact that we still must experience and eventually overcome may have been worse, think about it, if the pandemic hit the world 10 years earlier, with less progress in digitalization than today. At the time when the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many aspects of public and commercial life into remote environment, continued economic development, innovation, and employment depend on cross-border access to digitally delivered services and upon the responsible and seamless movement of data across borders. This pandemic has taught us some important lessons. First, about the importance and value of data sharing, and second, that privacy and data protection remain as relevant as ever. Next slide, please. Over the last few months, Microsoft and other organizations have focused on delivering digital tools to empower people and organizations at the forefront of the response to the pandemic. Broadly speaking, our role as a company has been to use data and technology to address the public health needs of the world that includes the decisions that are being made about opening or closing economies, the delivery of healthcare services, and the data and technology that is advancing the quest for vaccine and for therapeutic treatments. This current health crisis has particularly demonstrated the importance of enabling cross-border data flows, to enable epidemiological and other scientific research, to enable countries to model for spread of the disease and examine possible interventions. But examining the issues from a broader perspective, one can ask what the long-term implications of the pandemic will be for the regulation of data transfers and global data sharing. While it is too soon to say for sure, two major trends can already be discerned. Next slide, please. First of all, the current situation has provided enormous momentum for emerging technologies and their potential to be applied for the public cause. We saw countries and companies focusing on technologies such as tracking, tracing, and testing to fight the pandemic. Microsoft, for example, has not developed tracing apps, but we have taken the opportunity to reflect on these issues. We issued 7 principles around contact tracing and exposure notification to address value tensions that have emerged between privacy and public health. We did so to start a robust conversation around the world about what are the ways in which we need to protect data. Our approach is grounded on the belief that these technologies can assist in fighting the outbreak, but organizations have responsibility to ensure that the appropriate guardrails are built in. For these innovative technology solutions to succeed, people also need to understand how their personal data will be collected and used, and companies and organizations need to be accountable and responsible for this data. This will also help drive efforts to ensure that the full range of technological innovation available for harnessing data for public good while protecting privacy are considered, including differential privacy, federated learning, decentralized identities, and other anonymization techniques. This is even more true when we talk about health data. There is no doubt that health information is sensitive data and its confidentiality must be protected. Yet, the release of health data is essential to help citizens navigate this pandemic and to successfully allocate resources. People should be able to access their health data quickly, efficiently, and seamlessly while having the power of controlling who can access their data and when. This trusted dynamic encourages active participation. Without transparency and open communication, a fair balance between data access and data protection is impossible. Nevertheless, with a solid data infrastructure and collaborative governance framework in place, change is possible and lives can be saved. Preserving privacy as we develop and implement any technological solution that involves the collection and use of personal data and will be critical for Microsoft. To a certain extent, however, the aspects that we believe are relevant for the responsible design and use of technology as part of the pandemic response are relevant to a broader variety of discussions where the trade-offs between more safety versus more privacy have been put into question, the core of the fundamental right to privacy. I hope that this debate that will follow on these broader issues. Next slide, please. With COVID-19 vaccines now available, Microsoft has joined the Vaccination Credential Initiative, a coalition helping to define and advocate for standard models for organization administering COVID-19 vaccines, who would then provide individuals with digital access to their vaccination records using open and global interoperable standards. Microsoft and its partners are actively working with public health agencies and healthcare providers globally to deliver digital solutions to enable registration capabilities for patients and providers, phased scheduling for vaccinations, streamlined reporting of immunization progress through secure data exchange that utilizes global accepted industry standards. We are glad to see this recognized by the recent European Commission's communication, A United Front to Beat COVID-19, which recommends the creation of vaccination certificates, which can be used and recognized in health systems across the EU. Next slide, please. Beyond demonstrating proof of vaccination with this digital vaccination record, EU citizens could be reminded when to get their second vaccine dose, opt in to report adverse events, or to share vaccination records with health service providers and registries. This aligns with our vision to enable trustworthy, verifiable, and universally recognized digital records of vaccination as a key milestone urgently needed worldwide to safely enable people to return to work, school, events, or travel. The last mile in these efforts is to empower individuals vaccinated for COVID-19 to access their vaccination records in a secure, verifiable, and privacy-preserving way. Next slide, please. The second trend, global trend, is the rise in data nationalism. While countries are currently focusing their efforts on threats to their own economies and social systems, data access, privacy, and international data transfers have been very much in the news in recent months. Increasing concerns from government about safety and security underscore the urgent need for a new approach to engender trust and confidence in digital economy. Next slide, please. And yet, as you are all aware, the Schrems II judgment from the European Court of Justice has invalidated the EU-US Privacy Shield as a data transfer mechanism and has held the standard contractual clauses remain valid where the controller uses additional safeguards and supplementary measures. The European Data Protection Board published the draft supplemental recommendations in November 2020 about the assessments that data exporters have to carry out in the light of the Schrems II decision. Next slide, please. While we are waiting for the final recommendation to be published, Microsoft proactively moved ahead to provide additional commitments called Defending Your Data Protections. We announced these protections in mid-November 2020. The Defending Your Data Protections address precisely the issues identified by Schrems II decision in terms of government access and redress for data subjects. These protections are also consistent with the draft guidance from the European Data Protection Board and obviously are in addition to the rights customers and their users have under GDPR. Our Defending Your Data Protection commit us to two things. First, we commit to challenge every government request for public sector or enterprise customer data from any government where there is a lawful basis for doing so. Microsoft is managing all government demands to ensure they are legally valid and appropriate. Second, we back this up with financial commitment in which we commit to provide monetary compensation to these customer users if we disclose their data in response to a government request in violation of the GDPR. Both of these commitments go beyond the current European Data Protection Board draft recommendation in material ways. We are going forward in this journey, and we will continue to assess and work through what else may need to be done as regulatory guidance unfolds and evolves in the next few weeks. Next slide, please. Furthermore, for many years, Microsoft has had in place legal, technical, and organizational measures to support our commitments to customers, including in the standard contractual clauses, and to protect customer data and personal data. These measures include no backdoors and no direct access to customer data and personal data, dedicated teams who check if government requests for data are legally correct, and a commitment to push back as much as we lawfully can. Pending final recommendations from the European Data Protection Board, review our commitments under the standard contractual clauses, also in our information in our transparency report on how rarely we receive US national security requests, as helping our customers to determine if their risk posture is still acceptable. Next slide, please. However, strict EU rules about data transfers are sometimes integrated in strict data localization requirements and could thus become less about granting sufficient protection for the processing of personal data transferred abroad and more about prioritization in storage of data locally. We believe that as the possibility of data localization increases, it becomes increasingly important for policymakers to understand the trade-offs of localization, particularly considering the current pandemic. The relocation of data and technology in the EU may not address government access, as the data and technology may still be accessible to government agencies through links with technology, networks, systems, or entities in a third country. Localization requirements can reduce the ability of companies to use new cutting-edge technology, impede growth, and prevent new businesses from scaling. Data localization also may impose operational costs that impact entry into market, undermining the efficiency of cloud services, and negatively impact resiliency and failover capabilities. Requiring data, including health data, to be stored locally does little to increase privacy or data security. The confidentiality of data not depend on which country the information is stored in, only on the measures used to store it securely, such as via encryption and the policies and procedures the firms follow in storing or analyzing the data. From a technical perspective, security may be better advanced through measures that restrict potential logistical access to data. Finally, we believe that the ultimate choice on data locality should rest with the user, who is best placed to assess the specific interests in each use case. Next slide, please. New solutions are necessary to enable continued data flows along with the legally required improvement in privacy protections. It is vital to consider carefully what measures can satisfy all the relevant legal constraints. Negotiating an EU-US adequacy agreement is important in short term. There are strong reasons for the EU and the US to seek agreements so that the EU Commission can issue an adequacy decision soon. On an even longer timescale, there are strong reasons for the US, the EU, and democratic allies to engage systematically on a realistic and protective set of guidelines for government access to personal data held by the private sector. Such a process should include input from a range of expert stakeholders, including data protection and privacy experts, but also experts in areas such as national security, law enforcement, and economic policy. As governments, regulators, and individuals grapple with the pandemic, it is important that data protection and privacy be built into the solutions that they develop, including mechanisms to protect data shared across borders. This will also require countries to begin developing a conception of the global public interest. Governments and industry have a responsibility to use the tools we have in our hands to fight the pandemic, but we also have a responsibility to minimize the impact on our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right to protection of personal data and privacy, and even privacy in the public sphere. The decisions we take now have the potential to create the future that solves problems rather than exacerbates them. I want to acknowledge once again that we are living in a time that will be remembered for what we do now and for what we do next. And we want to look back at this as an inflection point, which gives a real positive change that we can create together. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Cornelia, for being with us and for sharing experience and views of Microsoft's response to the pandemic management and to the post-Schrems 2 global data transfers. And for me, I was really interested in the concept of the control, which you give back, or you ensure that the customers are given back in these turbulent times. And really, this shows the responsibility of the company and corporate approach of Microsoft to these kind of developments. And data localization, for example, it's really brilliant. So once again, thank you, Cornelia, for being with us, and all the best.
Thank you, and all stay safe. Thanks a lot. Bye.